There's been a surge in fraud and scam alerts in our area in the past few weeks, so we'll tell you what to look out for and what to do if you do get scammed. That's next on WNIN Newsmakers. Welcome in. I'm Jessica Costello, evening news anchor for Eyewitness News. With us now is Detective Nathan Van Cleve of the Evansville Police Department to talk a little bit about some of the more recent scams that have popped up in our area recently. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, these scams are such a nuisance for a lot of people now, and it seems they may be even getting a little more high-tech or a little more advanced, if you will. So first I want to ask you, what are the scams that you feel have persisted through the years that just won't go away?
Sure. So, I mean, when it comes to scams and many other things, there's nothing new under the sun. And so the same basic scams, the framework that we're seeing now, it's the same ones that have been around for many years. The only thing that changes is the technology that we're using. And so then those same kinds of scams are just being perpetrated through the new technology with the internet and the phone and cryptocurrency and such.
When you talk about technology, how hard does it make it then to, one, catch whoever's doing this, but also stop it from happening again when this technology is so good?
Right. So, you know, with scammers, they are targeting you. And before, if they were going to target you, it would have to be something in person that they do or something through the mail or eventually able to do it over the phone. But now it's so ubiquitous, the technology around us with our email, with our apps, with our text messages, that we're constantly being targeted. And so even if you are protecting yourself by being careful who you're talking to out in public or who you receive a phone call from, you've still got your text messages and emails and all of this that you're being targeted with. And with that technology, there's so many ways also for the criminals to kind of mask who they are by using, say, fake phone numbers to contact you. And so even though you write down the phone number, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do to track that particular phone number because it's a fake, basically, caller ID.
There's a few that I want to go over here. You mentioned a lot, the phone, mail, email, and we were even talking about the grocery store one we've just seen recently. But let's talk about the phone, just someone calling your phone. I've seen some, I don't know anybody personally, but I've seen some being reported on that somehow they are able to use the actual number of the bank to let's say you're using Wells Fargo. Unfortunately, that's one that I see a lot in the news. It's the actual number of the bank pop up. So you're under the impression that this is the actual bank calling, but then if you do whatever they say, and then you call that bank back, it's in fact not the bank, and they had no idea. So how are you able, what would you recommend people do when they're getting a call from their bank and they're just a little iffy about what the call is?
Sure. So, yeah, you can never fully trust the caller ID. That can always be masked and made up to be any particular phone number or any particular name on there. So if you get a call, which I have from my bank, and it said my bank's name on it and said, you know, did you write such and such check to somebody? I'm like, no, I didn't. It was for several $1,000s. And they're like, oh, can you confirm your date of birth? You know, I'm like, no, I can't. But they said, well, somebody is writing this check on your account. You need to go to the bank and verify this, which I did. And it was indeed the bank calling me.
Right.
But like, it is good practice. Like, never for any reason would you be giving it to this person calling you. What I could do is either go to the bank personally or find the phone number for the bank independently and call that phone number, never giving it out over having received communication.
What information is too much to give over the phone? Because I know usually when I hear they're asking for, you know, your social security or your routing number or something like that. But you even just said you wouldn't even give them your birthday. So do you mean no information is probably the best route until you connect with who you believe is an actual representative or go in person? Right.
If I know for sure that I'm talking to somebody trustworthy, that they're needing, I'm at the bank, they ask me my personal information to get into my account, okay, good. But if it's somebody who has contacted me or I'm not sure who I'm talking to, your date of birth, address, phone numbers, emails, social security number, the more detailed the information is, the worse it is.
And then you move to things like email. And email, I feel like, is such a hard one, too, because they can also mask where those emails are coming from, and it can look like it's coming from a source, Netflix or a grocery store or Amazon or something like that, and it says click here to see your order, or there's a problem with your order, and then you click that link, and who knows what happens from there. Is that the most, if we're talking about email, is that the most common one that you see where it says like click this link?
Yeah, that's one. For clicking a link or downloading something, and a lot of times it's the email is one letter off, or it's a .org instead of a .com, or somebody's email has legitimately been compromised and you've received this email. So what I usually like to do if I'm receiving something that seems a little bit off, call that place or check on your app, to verify that Netflix has sent you something, and not instead of responding to that email or clicking on that email or calling a phone number on that email, because it can be also going to the criminal. So always try to step around and make contact.
It sounds like now we almost just have to be overly cautious about everything, because scammers are getting smarter, and like you said, that technology is getting a lot better. Which brings me to the in-person part. We spoke about the grocery store. Just recently in Evansville is a Ruler Foods location that I don't know the details about it, but somehow had a skimmer, that's what it's called, in one of their systems, and thankfully, it sounded like the employee caught it maybe before they opened, but that for a lot of people could be scary, because when you present your card, you're not always thinking about tapping, and you insert your card and you feel like you're safe in person, because we're supposed to feel safe when we're talking to somebody we trust, and who would think that they were going to get scammed at a grocery store? So do you encourage people to look for certain things on the little card reader, or how do you even see that it's a skimmer?
So for the most part, if you are able to tap to pay, you're going to be safe.
Okay.
A second option would be to insert using the chip portion of your card rather than swiping. If the machine is forcing you to, for whatever reason, need to swipe, then it'd be helpful to be a little more cautious of taking a looking at it and make sure it doesn't look like something additional is on the machine, something out of place. But whatever method of payment you use, whether it's card or writing a check, or cash couldn't be scammed, but now you have the danger of you're carrying this cash around somebody, so criminals are always going to be trying to get your money, whatever the case is. If we are hyper sensitive to all the dangers, then it's hard for us to live at peace.
Right.
So I would say if you can tap or insert your card, you're probably going to be okay. If you have to swipe, then maybe take a look at it. If it looks like something additional's on it, you can even want to give a little tug on it. Not don't tear up the machine, but then you'd be able to see if it had something placed on top of it.
And is it easy for, once law enforcement does, once they are involved in that situation, is it easy for law enforcement to figure out where the skimmer came from or how it got there, or is it traceable to anybody at that point?
Somewhat. So we have video footage of the two people that placed the skimmers at one of the locations. Typically with skimmers, it's out-of-town groups that are traveling from city to city. And so potentially we're here for just a short amount of time and went on to the next place. And so there's some difficulty in identifying who they are, but we're working on that, and there's a pretty good chance we'll figure out who they are.
Well, not all scams are totally money related. You talked about, that sounded like your actual bank asking for your birthday at that point, but they are sometimes just looking for information. How could that be used against somebody if they aren't necessarily looking for money and they do just want information? What kind of scams are out there that they just want to know your birthday or your social security number, or et cetera? Sure.
So the more personal information that they have from you, the more ability they have to access your bank account, to take out a loan in your name, to open a line of credit in your name. Or maybe they have other types of fraud that they're wanting to do, and so they want to use your information to perpetrate that fraud on somebody else. So just the more of your information that's compromised, it makes it easier for them to access your accounts and monies.
Let's say unfortunately someone gets caught up in a scam, whether that's email, mail, at the grocery store, wherever it's at, they get caught up in a scam, what do you do next?
Sure. So depending on the particular scam, you can contact the police is one thing. If the account is still being compromised, I would say actually the first step is to contact your bank. Make sure everything is, if it's your card, make sure it's stopped. Make sure the bank is aware of it and they can do what they need to do to secure that. And then contact us, and then we can start investigating it. Two other things that's helpful is to go to a website called ic3.gov. It's the Internet Crime Complaint Center that the FBI operates, and it's where you can report directly to the FBI this incident, because some of these are smaller incidents, but then they're able to pair them together with similar incidents and have a bigger case potentially. The Better Business Bureau scam tracker is also very helpful. You can report it to there or check and see, is this a scam or not.
So what are the odds when we're talking about catching people that are putting the skimmers in there, or maybe sending those emails? Because a lot of those people I wouldn't think are local on the Evansville level or really anywhere in our region. So what are the odds that the scammers get caught? Do you have statistics around that, or?
I don't have any statistics, and it's hard to answer that question specifically because if you receive a phone call and you get scammed and you've sent money in $20,000 somewhere, the vast majority of those cases, the person who called you is overseas in another country, and we're going to have zero capability of tracking them down and arresting them in another country. But in order for that money to have gotten to them, it's probably gone through a few different steps within the United States before it ultimately ends up over there. Some of those steps are knowing participants in the scams. Others are unknowing participants in the scams. And so if we're able to track down a knowing person that has then sent that money over, then there's potential to press charges there. But it's impossible to get the person overseas and difficult to follow all of those steps.
Well, how much coordination is there when you do cross lines like jurisdiction? How much coordination is there? Because I'm sure every law enforcement agency wants to catch the scammers, right? They all have the same motive, but how much coordination is there when you're crossing even state lines to catch a criminal that may have done something in the Evansville area?
Sure. So the higher the dollar amount loss, the easier it is to get cooperation with other jurisdiction, because every city is dealing with their own crime and dealing with their own scams. And so if somebody's been scammed out of $500 and they sent it, over there, it's going to be difficult to get cooperation. But if somebody has sent $500,000 over there to another city, we're able then to call that city. But we lean heavily on our federal partners. Okay. There's two of us in our office, and we're both Secret Service task force officers, and cooperate with our local Secret Service agent as well as FBI and IRS agents to then tap into their network in those other cities to help to follow up.
Is there anything else that we're missing you'd like people to know in terms of scams?
So there are many important red flags to look for. Every single person is going to be targeted for a scam. You're going to be targeted, and I'm going to be targeted, and your parents and your grandparents. The scams that they are going to fall for and that you're going to fall for, I would never fall for. However, I will fall for something that you're not, because the scams are designed for each person individually. So no person should ever feel like they're dumb because they fell for it. It's designed for you. So it's important to look for red flags for all of us. One, the scammers are going to create a sense of urgency that this money has to be sent right now, or something very bad is going to happen. They're also going to put you in a sense of isolation, that there's no way of escape to talk to somebody else, to get off the phone, to call a friend, to call the police and say, is this real? So try to take a step back from the urgency, take a step out of the isolation, and get some help to look at it. Some other red flags on online scams: if it looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. The item on Facebook you see advertised that's usually $5,000 and it says $1,000, and you send money up front, you're probably not going to see that item. But the biggest thing is how money would be sent. There is no reason to go to a Bitcoin cryptocurrency ATM. the transaction fees on there are 10 to 25% on each transaction, which makes no sense for anybody to do. So if you're told on the phone to pay for something to go to a Bitcoin ATM, don't do that. If you're told to send gift cards, don't do that. If you're told to do a wire transfer, it's probably not going to be legit. And then large sums of money in cash to either mail or to hand off to somebody for whatever the scam may be. Those 4 modes are very dangerous.
And it's very unfortunate because in some cases when, people do send those large sums of money, they sometimes don't see that money again because there's nothing the bank can do after that because you sent it.
Yes.
So it's a very dangerous thing, but we're glad you were here to kind of go through all that. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Detective. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Jed Medler, Director of Fraud Compliance at Liberty Federal Credit Union, to talk about how to secure your bank accounts from fraud and scammers. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, this is important because I think one thing that people don't want to lose is, of course, their money, their hard-earned money, and of course their savings. But unfortunately, these scams could really wrap them into that if they click the wrong link or if they answer the wrong questions. So I want to start by asking you, what are some of the financial scams that you've experienced with customers at the bank?
Sure. I'd like to start out saying that fraud in itself isn't so prevalent as we would think when you're thinking about a card scam or a physical theft, but it really comes down to working on that individual, socially engineering them into doing what they need them to do as a criminal. So when we're thinking about the newer scams, there's what's old is always new. They're always taking a play on older scams, twisting that a bit. They'll do advanced fee scams where they'll tell the person, hey, you've won $50,000, but in order to get this, you need to pay up front for the taxes. And don't worry about that. I'm going to send you a check in the mail. And you just deposit that check and take out the funds, send it to me, and purchase gift cards to do that with. That's always a scam. If they're asking you to pay up front, that's a scam. And obviously, it leaves that person's account, a negative balance if they're not careful. Some other scams that they need to be aware of would be, obviously, the crypto scams. They tell the person to take money out, put it into Bitcoin. They'll even tell them to mail cash to the person. And a lot of times, that leads to an investigation with law enforcement. So a lot of different scams that are out there today.
Now, do banks, and you can talk directly about Liberty, but do banks have any kind of education for customers in terms of scams and what to look out for? Because we've talked about that it's changing so much and that technology gets better. So how do you prepare your customers for the latest scams?
Definitely, yeah. At Liberty, we take it very seriously. I even helped develop a little newsletter article to help members so that they can be prepared of the newest scams, different trends. And really, we always encourage them to contact their financial institution first if they ever see any red flags, if they're ever questioning what to do, if they're uncertain if the call they received was really from the credit union or their financial institution. Always do that call back. And always feel free to talk to your local police department as well.
You talked about that newsletter, and that could be a very important piece of information for somebody that may be a little cautious in different situations. So how can people see that information?
Yeah, so if you're already a member, that would be emailed to you as well. We even put information out on our website. But, a lot of financial institutions do this, and I also encourage people to go to the Federal Trade Commission's website, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and also go to the FBI's website as well, because they'll have a lot of information on how to protect yourself from scams.
How would the bank respond to fraud versus scams differently, and how do you walk through that with your customers? Because I'm sure that it can be a very emotional response given a circumstance of maybe a large sum of money being sent somewhere. How do you guys work through that?
Yeah, so a fraud case is typically a little easier to work than a scam-related case because fraud typically involves that person just disputing a transaction. We work to get that person's money back and may even involve law enforcement if it's serious enough, just so that they can find the person that did this. Scams involve more of an emotional touch, and that's where the person has perhaps been in an employment scam. Maybe they've been in a romance scam and they thought that they were married or even about to marry someone. And now you're having to tell that person that everything that they thought was real is not real. And now you not only have to help them as much as you can to try to get their money back, but tell them that their wife or husband isn't who they say they are. And that can be devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. You take on a whole different role at that point, and I'm sure you guys have to just be so cautious with your words and make sure you're talking to them correctly, but also do your job and make sure you're helping them as much as you can moving forward. There are certain circumstances where the bank may be able to help. It's probably fraud where you can help and make sure that they get, their money back and whatnot. But in terms of scams, is there anything the bank can do?
At times there is, but what makes scams more difficult is that usually that person was a willing participant in the transactions that occurred. They agreed to send that money to the person. Maybe they even took out cash and handed it to the person. And getting that back is hardly, possible at all. So at times, though, if the person said that they mailed cash, we'll even work with the U.S. postal inspectors, intercept the package, and get that back. So a lot of financial institutions can do that as well.
And you've already talked about some of them, but can you kind of detail some of the red flags that you see that people should really be cautious about when they're looking at maybe anything related to their bank accounts, whether that's their routing number, their bank account number, anything related to that? What should they be a little bit cautious about sharing?
Well, if they're using online banking, never want to share your username and password. Never want to share an MFA code of multi-factor authentication that's sent to your phone. Sometimes the scammers will call them and say, we just need that number to verify you, and maybe even pose as your financial institution. And once they divulge that information, that leads them into an identity theft or even a theft from their account situation. So definitely be vigilant of that and monitor your accounts, sign up for transaction alerts, and that will help them to stay on top of it all.
Is there anything else when we're talking about fraud or scams that you want people to know to make sure that they're staying up to date on the latest ones and making sure they're protecting anything and everything regarding their money?
Yeah, be more proactive and cautious rather than trusting. So if you're thinking about identity theft and you don't want to be a victim, be cautious before you share all that information. Even consider placing a credit freeze or a credit fraud alert on your credit files with, the credit reporting agencies. That can help to prevent someone, if they did get your information, from taking your identity and stealing your money. So be cautious of the red flags. Always contact your financial institution first. Something as simple as your phone not even working anymore could mean that someone may have ported your phone number to a different device. And just be alert that could be the first red flag you need to look for.
And Jed, one of the things that people might be wondering is if there are any protections out there. Is there anything like fraud insurance people can get a hold of?
Well, there's no fraud insurance per se, but there are consumer protections at play. So when you think about government regulation, you also think about the card networks, and MasterCard, Visa, you name it. They will have zero liability protections. And also your own financial institution's account agreement kind of lays out how they are going to help you to dispute those transactions. So when you encounter fraud, that's when you can dispute the transaction, work with your financial institution, and they have timelines and that they work with in order to get that money back into your account.
It sounds like the best advice is to enjoy life, but question things as they come up. Is this email real, or is this phone call real? Maybe just if your bank calls, call your bank directly. It just sounds, to question things as they come up, but still trying not to question everything and enjoy your life. It's a hard balance there.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jed. I'm sure, this was very helpful. I'm sure we'll be talking again.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you to our guests for joining us to learn more about scam and fraud activity in our area. I'm Jessica Costello, Evening News Anchor for Eyewitness News. Thanks for watching WNIN Newsmakers.